All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And good morning, all. Yes, our show is on. Tony's here today, which is kind of cool. It's sort of a change up of things.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. Watching over things. Tony brings the technical magic all the time, you know. Kim's here, too.
Kim, how are you?
She brings the news magic, some news just as we're going on the air.
May the 4th be with you.
Yeah, that's right. Your power's a weak old man. You know, what dialogue do people all know from Star Wars? I would say most people know for these aren't the Jedis we're looking for. Does that mean anything?
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
We're not the droids we're looking for.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. I guess then everybody knows that dialogue since I didn't know it was droids.
Good job.
And then I always feel like everybody knows your powers are weak, old man. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than ever before, right? That whole piece of dialogue. Bring me the Millennium Falcon.
No.
That's
They
what
didn't
is
have
it?
the
What
name.
is it? What is the Millennium Falcon line? Bring me the Millennium Falcon. Bring me Skywalker, and I want him alive. Isn't there something like that?
Not in the first movie.
I don't know. I
There's
don't
not?
recognize this.
Because he doesn't know who Skywalker is yet in the first movie.
Maybe that's from Empire Strikes Back then.
I think so. Or Return of the Jedi.
Bring
which is in
me-
theaters right now in some areas.
I know they re-released it.
So cool.
Yeah,
Do they re-release it for the 4th, or they re-release it
No.
for?
It's just someone did it independently from what I understand. I don't think Disney had any involvement in it from what I understand.
Oh, interesting.
Disney doesn't like the original Star Wars, remember?
They don't have a piece of that?
No, they just don't promote it and don't use it really in anything.
I see.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'm looking through quotes now.
I think Elchie and Eric have the one. It's the Luke, I am your father.
But
Well,
that's
I
not
am
the
your father,
line.
Luke. Yeah, Luke, I'm your father.
That's actually not the line.
I know.
I am your father, Luke, right? What is it, Tony?
Let me find it. Hold on.
I am your father. Your lack of faith is disturbing. John Watson likes that one.
I feel like Vader's got so many great lines. You know, the bad guy always gets the best lines, right?
Also, James Earl Jones, right?
You're
Just
right.
That voice. Even
absolutely
you could have just said dumb things and it would have been awesome.
That's true. Anyway, interesting. We digress. Look, can we get back on course?
Sorry, we're looking for Star Wars quotes.
I
Yeah,
know,
that
here I am. It's, we're just Googling
have
here.
Googling.
Yeah, just
I know.
keep talk among yourselves while we try to Google this. Oh, you're on the air.
Do you know
No,
I'm kind of a
that
big
what's
deal.
happening?
Yeah, I didn't know.
Whoever is producing
All
this
right,
thing
here we go.
has no idea what they're doing.
Let me tell you what's happening today. We got some law and disorder still to come. I have a conversation with a journalist, a blogger, New York Times best-selling author will be through, a guy named Cory Doctorow. He's written a book. It's a novel. It's a heist novel about crypto, about grifters, about crime bosses. His background is around this world of banking and crypto. And so when you look at SVB and First Republic and the issues with the banking system, very much in his wheelhouse. So we'll talk to him a little bit about that and also about his book. Jefferson Graham is coming through. He is here on Thursdays, Tech Thursday. Many things in technology that we will touch on. That'll all happen this hour. Then next hour, David Katz joins us. I want him to comment on the latest slapdown in a New York court of Donald Trump. And if you're not familiar with that, you'll become familiar in the 11 o'clock hour. Trump took a shot at the New York Times. shot missed. And now the court is saying Trump needs to pay the legal fees of the New York Times in addition to being slapped down. So all of that's still to come. I also saw that I saw in the Bay Area, it's a little thing, but I'll just do it in Law and Disorder, I guess. Is there anything else before I get into Law and Disorder? Is there anything else I need to do? Oh, there is.
Found the actual misquote.
I am your father.
He actually says, "No, I am your father," is what the line is. So there you go.
No, comma.
Oh,
I am your
because
father.
because Luke says you killed my father, right?
Yeah,
He
exactly.
says, no, I am your father.
Exactly. There, we finished.
That's good. Thank you, though. You buttoned it
Well,
out. I appreciate that.
Since
Yeah,
we circled back around to it,
I'm not gonna cry.
No, but I
I
am.
will say Undecito comes up with probably the best one. Do or do not. There is no try.
Oh, what is
Yoda.
that? I don't remember that.
Yoda said that to
Oh.
Luke while he was training him. You do or do not. There is no try.
Thanks, Tony.
There is a.
Kim, how are you?
I have to say, there is a Lucas interview in which he discusses why Yoda is there. And I'm trying to remember what he said. It was something along the lines of, I wanted there to be some kind of elder or something. Because Yoda is not in the first movie, right? Yoda is introduced, I believe,
In
and
the
that's
beginning of the second movie.
okay, and I think Lucas just talks about the fact that he kind of came up with the Yoda design in this sort of random way. Remember, the story was just that it was of less significance than I thought it would be. There was less planning that went into Yoda.
Yeah, if you see
than
the
I
concept
would've
art, Yoda was going to be a person at first, and then it went through
Thank
many
you.
like iterations and stuff like that. And then
Right.
they're like, "We'll do a puppet," and like that's not going to work.
And
I like Yoda.
Yeah.
Oh, Frank Oz, right? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. What's not to like? All right, much
This
to
piggy
do.
is Yoda.
Smash the like button like a
With
boss.
your iron rod.
Tonight is our meetup. Looking forward to that. Everybody should have received their link for tonight. Tony, you're going to be joining, right? You'll be popping in for a little bit?
Yeah. I should be around.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
My recording session will be done by then.
You got Tony, Albert, John, Kim, myself, and a whole host of people who have stepped up, made a contribution, and held a spot. A few people held spots and then said, hey, I can't make it, but, it's my pleasure to make a donation, support the show. Please.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary. In fact, I'll visit that person by name a little bit later in the show. There are a couple of them, actually. So technically, I think we're at capacity pretty much. I guess I technically would have one more spot. But we've had a really great time. There it is. It's the happy half hour for tonight. It's actually a 45-minute meetup, meet and greet. It's tonight, 7 to 7:30 or 7 to 7:45. And again, only 15 spots available. Only one spot now with one person dropping. And you can register or send a note of interest to themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let's not put it off any further. It's time for some law and
In the
disorder.
criminal justice system, the people
Pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care.
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law, you're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
The story that out of, before I get to the Proud Boys, the story out of San Jose that just bums me out. And, it's just these things that have to do with sort of mayhem / robbery. They just really bum me out. Of course, anything with animals or living creatures, really. 50 koi fish were reportedly stolen from the Japanese Friendship Garden in San Jose.
Those are expensive, right? They're like thousands of dollars.
Yeah, they are expensive. I don't know that each and every one is thousands, but they're definitely, pricey.
Mm-hmm.
The fish were placed in the garden as a symbol of everlasting friendship with San Jose's sister city of Okayama, Japan. The garden was first planted in 1965.
We'll show you what we think of your friendship.
It's just brutal. San Jose cops have asked anybody with information on the koi fish theft to contact them, but they don't have any leads. I don't know. I mean, that's some pretty low-rent stuff, man. That's up there with ripping off people's dogs at gunpoint, and I just don't know what's, That's why I'm a tough law and order guy. I'm a law and order lib. I don't think you should be able to jack these living creatures around and, it's another level of theft and cruelty. So, anyway, that's what happened in San Jose. Now to the national story. 4 Proud Boys are convicted of sedition. This is a key January 6th case, as you know. The verdict is a blow against the far-right group, they say, and another milestone in the Justice Department's prosecution of the Trump rioters, the pro-Trump rioters who stormed the Capitol. The 4 Proud Boy members, including their former leader, Enrique Tarrio, who Kim is quick to point out isn't white.
Well, it's a white nationalist group, and the guy identifies as, he says, Afro-Cuban. He's a black guy from Cuba.
Yeah.
Why are you fighting for the white people? I don't know.
I guess if you're committed to bringing violence upon other people of color, you're okay, at least for the moment. But they were convicted yesterday after we got off the air of seditious conspiracy for plotting to keep President Donald J. Trump in power after his election defeat by leading a violent mob and attacking the Capitol on January 6th. The jurors failed to reach a decision on the sedition charge for one of the defendants, Dominic Pizzola, although he was convicted of other serious felonies. There were 7 days of deliberation on this. Federal District Court is where the whole thing went down in Washington. The trial was the last of the 3 sedition cases that the prosecutors out of the federal government brought against key figures in this Capitol attack. The sedition charge, you'll remember, we talked about it on the show, is a little bit treacherous. It hadn't been used for some time. Really goes back to efforts to protect the federal government against secessionist rebels during the Civil War. So this is not a, fresh off the rack kind of prosecution. And we discussed it, the actual, and we can touch on this with David Katz, the actual case and burden of proof that falls to the prosecutor is not insubstantial. It's not an easy case to win. But this secessionist charge, sedition charge, was also used in 2 separate trials against 9 members of another far-right group, the Oath Keepers. 6 of those defendants, including Stuart Rhodes, he's the organization's founder and leader, were convicted of sedition there. Each of the other of those Oath Keeper people were found guilty of other serious felonies. Apparently they were steely as the verdict was read. No one moved. And on the conspiracy count alone, the men could face a maximum of nearly 50 years in prison.
Isn't one of the possible consequences of seditious conspiracy a hanging death? Or no? Did we just did we do away with that?
In the good old days.
In the good old days, that was the way it was.
Been that, yes.
Yeah.
But no longer. Yeah. They could have used the same gallows, though, if they had those still in effect that, they were going to hang Mike Pence from. No, I don't believe that's not in the game anymore. The defendants were taken into custody in a series of arrests, of course, that began in January of 2021.
It's kind of
more than 20 other members of the group from chapters from New York to Hawaii were ultimately charged in separate cases in connection with the Capitol attack. They did a really good job of wrapping everybody up, through surveillance video. But it took 3 months this sedition trial alone took 3 months. And there were frequent delays. The defense and prosecution, several decisions by the presiding judge, all kind of caused a very sort of turbulent atmosphere in the courtroom and along the way. And this conspiracy law was being tested apparently through the whole thing. The thing that was allowed into court, and then I'll move on, was the violent behavior and aggressive language of members of the Proud Boys. And that helped build a conspiracy case. But in that particular instance, that evidence was around people who were not directly connected all the time to these 5 defendants. They only had limited connections. But the judge allowed the prosecution to introduce damning evidence about the violent behavior and aggressive language of members of the Proud Boys who had this limited interaction. The rules also permitted jurors to convict on conspiracy even if they found there was no plan to disrupt the certification of the election. If there was an unspoken agreement to do that, then jurors could convict. If jurors came to the conclusion that, well, that was the idea here to derail this, then they could convict. And they did.
I was reading this op-ed in CNN, on CNN.com earlier, and I posted the link in the chat. It's called The Head-Scratching Anomaly at the Heart of the Proud Boys. To become a member of the Proud Boys, apparently you have to agree that white men were overwhelmingly responsible for the success of Western culture, while 5 people beat you about the body.
Wow.
So you have to say it while you're getting beaten up.
Sure.
I mean, the whole thing is rooted in violence. So from the very get-go, you're getting the beat down.
It's a frat boy hazing kind of move
Right.
meets white supremacy, right?
Right.
The deal on marijuana is changing. That's right, everybody. The deal on marijuana after 2 decades is changing.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Maryland moves from recognizing medicinal cannabis to recreational use in Maryland, everybody. The signing of legislation legalizing cannabis in Maryland marks a milepost in a long, strange trip for at least one Republican former delegate turned marijuana policy advocate. His name is Don Murphy. He's a former lawmaker from Baltimore County. He once sponsored legislation a couple of decades ago that made it possible for someone arrested for possession of marijuana to argue it was for medicinal purposes. That was Maryland's first acknowledgement that marijuana had medicinal value. And that was a 2003 law that was signed in. The new law, though, opens the door to Maryland's first legal recreational sales. That'll begin July 1st. The bill was one of more than 180 pieces of legislation signed into law. Those bills also included protections to access to abortion in Maryland and expansions of gender-affirming health care for transgender persons. So Maryland is on the right side of many of these issues as of yesterday. Meanwhile, on the other side of America, there's this out of the Wisconsin legislature. Republican legislators in Wisconsin voted down a marijuana legalization proposal. They want to keep it illegal in Wisconsin, the GOP. The proposal was put forward by Democratic Governor Tony Evers. Marijuana legalization was one of more than 500 items included in a budget proposal by Evers and rejected by the Republicans this week. The governor also had proposed full marijuana legalization in his previous term. Republicans who control the Wisconsin legislature defeated the proposal. And Wisconsin is among the few states that have not legalized marijuana in any way. and it's because of GOP lawmakers there. Now, they're saying, the GOP, that they're working on their own bill. Just like Trump said he had his own health care plan. I mean, they've had a lot of time. That's why I'm laughing. But they say they are working on a bill that would legalize medical marijuana. They don't want legalization in Wisconsin, the GOP, and they have voted it down. That's Law and Disorder for today.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
On the fact that marijuana is no longer or will not be legal in Wisconsin. It was never legal. Leonard said this. First, this. Vicky and Sausalito, not to mention that. I'm sorry. I was looking for this. Thank you. Yeah. Don't tell that to the students at the University of Wisconsin. Yeah, there are a few blunts floating around. You know the difference between a blunt and a spliff, Kim?
I don't. Isn't a
Tony?
blunt a cigarette? Are they both cigarettes? I don't know.
I ask you in the chat. Where are my
weed smokers at?
Do we know the difference between a blunt and a spliff? Is the question. I don't think it's a millionaire question, but no? Anybody? A blunt, I think, is a well, it's Googleable, you know. Kim, why don't you Google it, or Tony, why don't you Google it?
Blunt versus spliff.
I don't think we have really that many. It's old school. Spliff is a Brit joint with tobacco. It says, I don't know. I can't work the chat. You can figure out. Blunt rolled tobacco. Spliff is a large joint. Thank you very much, Grady.
Yes.
You can count on Grady. Anyway, whether you have a spliff or a blunt, it is not legal in Wisconsin.
Oh,
look at that, Tony.
Yeah.
Rally's actual
Joint,
photographs
spliff,
of
blunt.
each.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Tony.
Wow.
That really helps.
It does help. So when you see at the marijuana store, you see, generally speaking, the center one, right, Tony? That was is it Tony or I don't know if it's
That's Tony, yeah.
So a spliff has tobacco and marijuana, according to this. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then there you go.
And the blunt is the has a tobacco leaf or hemp leaf, but
yeah.
it's pure marijuana.
Yes.
And the joint is clean cannabis.
Yes.
Great. Well,
there you go. We have learned something today.
I'm sorry that I didn't know. I think Vilma feels let down by the fact that I didn't know. I'm not saying it's news you can use, but I'm also saying it's probably we didn't know it. Maybe you didn't know it. So
now we know.
All right.
The more you listen, the more you know. Just saying.
Kim's news upcoming. In the next half hour, we've got Jefferson Graham and Cory Doctorow. And then in the 11 o'clock hour, the great David Katz, who will set us straight on those things happening to Trump. And I think there's breaking news around Ed Sheeran.
There is, actually. I lead my newscast with it.
Oh, great. So we'll get to that next. Smash the like button like a boss.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Mark Thompson Show.
There's a reason that this place is fun.
It is true.
What he's got going here is a situation.
It is true. Let's get Kim's news and then, yeah. Then
the Mark Thompson Show.
Right, that's it.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and yes, it is breaking news. Ed Sheeran has been found not liable In his music copyright infringement case, the singer was accused of ripping off chords from Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On when creating his 2014 hit Thinking Out Loud. His lawyers argued the only things the songs have in common are unprotectable chord progressions that have been used in many other songs. Jury agrees. Ed Sheeran, off the hook. They say this is an original song, Thinking Out Loud.
To quickly just mention David Katz, our guest at 11:05, once again with the correct prediction. He is Nostrakatzis. He gets all his predictions correct, and he was right. He said Ed Sheeran would prevail. One of the reasons he said that Ed Sheeran would prevail, he noted, is that Ed Sheeran, in most artists who take the stand, are incredibly endearing witnesses. And so they just have a way about them that the jury falls in love with. And he predicted that Sheeran would prevail. And indeed that happened.
He played a little concert in,
Right.
on the stand. And I think everyone in the courtroom was like, right? Yeah. So Ed Sheeran, that's his song. He doesn't have to share royalties with anybody else. This is the case out of Atlanta, where the alleged gunman in Wednesday's mass shooting is being charged now with 1 count of murder and 4 counts of aggravated assault. His name is Deon Patterson, waived his right to appear in court today. He's a 24-year-old former member of the Coast Guard who allegedly opened fire in the waiting room of a medical building in Atlanta. Former President Trump may be at his New York City civil trial after all. Said he wasn't going, but the Trump's legal team said he would not testify in writer E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit against him for sexual battery and defamation of character. The Trump, who calls Carroll's accusations false, said he will probably attend the trial. So, okay. Just going to leave Trump's picture up because I think it's related. A Washington, D.C. jury has convicted 4 of the 5 Proud Boys members on trial for seditious conspiracy in connection with the 2021 U.S. Capitol riot. The jury did not reach a verdict for the 5th defendant in this case. President Biden is issuing an executive order that will expand the White House's ability to sanction individuals and groups involved in the conflict in Sudan. Fighting between Sudan's military and a paramilitary group has left hundreds dead and thousands fleeing that country. President Biden is calling for a durable ceasefire between the two groups. And today marks 53 years since the shootings at Kent State University. 4 students were killed, 9 others injured May 4th, 1970. Ohio's National Guard fired an estimated 67 rounds on unarmed students back in 1967. So that's definitely something to remember. And of course, also today, May the 4th be with you, this May 4th. Today, people around the world will celebrate Star Wars Day, the unofficial holiday honoring Jedi, droids, and the Force. Doesn't get its roots from a galaxy far, far away. Instead, it dates back to 1979 in Britain when Margaret Thatcher was named Britain's first female prime minister. Did you know that? To celebrate her victory, her party took out an ad in the London Evening News saying, "May the 4th be with you."
Oh.
Maggie, congratulations. The catchy pun has since been the unofficial greeting for Star Wars fans on the holiday. So there you go.
Wow.
This show is indeed crowdfunded, and that means we rely on you. You can help keep us going by contributing via Patreon and PayPal, and the website is The Mark Thompson Show, where you can find those links and so very much more. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson. The Mark Thompson Show.
Smash it with your iron rod. Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
What he's got going here is a situation.
It's unbelievably offensive.
Put up your pants, my man. Pull up those pants.
Ralph Nader just sent me a book. Did he send you one too?
I offer this sincere apology to you today.
Everything is going extremely well.
Call me a liar. Know what you call him? You, sir, are a liar.
You are a cover-up artist, and you are a liar.
Liar, your pants are on fire!
Google told me.
Can you let him finish, sir? It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
No.
I'm going to tell you what I think.
What are the porn stars doing?
Do you have a secret now?
Doesn't anybody better weed?
100% effective. How about that?
Say what?
There is no defense for my conduct.
I misspoke. I stand corrected. And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
Time's up, mother effers.
Yeah. I love it. You know, that Time's Up, mother effers is from ABC News correspondent who you can see now on World News Tonight with David Muir, Aaron Katursky. He was on KGO with he was reading, I think, the communications of, one of these Proud Boys type guys, right?
Right.
And we just loved it as a drop. So the Time's Up, mother effers is what gets used. So that's that. Thank you, Teresa, for a super sticker. Today is a day that we remind you that we're crowdfunded. Appreciate everybody throwing in as you do. Not a lot of pressure, I hope, but we try to mention it regularly just so that you're aware of it. And so these super stickers and super chats really help. Stan Pollock, what up, CPA Stan Pollock? Big shout out.
Big shout out.
Looking forward to another great show. Me too. Hasn't started yet. I so appreciate everybody who jumps on. And then tonight, of course, is our big event. It's the meet and greet, and we are now at capacity. So
That's it?
Yeah, we will not be taking any more. But those of you who have written me, I will get back to you because
we could do another one, right?
Well, not only that, I don't know that we'll do another one. This might be the only one we do, but maybe we'll do another one. I don't know, one way or the other. But what I was going to say is, if we get a cancellation, then I can, even this afternoon, invite you in. So if you have an interest, do reach us. It's the MarkThompsonShow@gmail.com. So even though all the spots are taken now, we just had one drop. Somebody said couldn't make it. So somebody who just wrote us this morning will get in. But I'm just saying that most of the spots are taken. So that might be the way to put it. It's Tech Thursday. By the way, the author will be in the 11 o'clock hour. Look, I'm not really.
Whoever is producing this thing has no idea what they're doing.
Not really clued in
It's
on
the
what the
producer's
hell
fault.
is happening here. I don't know. Between the meetup and the emails and scheduling and rescheduling, it's a mess. But I'm excited that this guy, he's a rock. He is the longtime USA Today tech writer who left USA Today for greener pastures and a better life, the freedom of his own platform. And he found that in a big, big way with Photo Walks TV and his own Substack. He is a great friend to the show, and he's here now on Thursdays. Jefferson Graham, everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Look at you with the hair kind of like tousled. You got like you look good, buddy. You do.
Yeah, growing long.
I like it. How was the Japan stuff? Did you get some traction on that?
Yeah, did well. Did very well. Yeah.
Good.
Next stop, Columbus, Ohio, right?
Well, next up today is you have your live show today at 2 o'clock.
Live show at 2 p.m. with a very special guest. If you can't make the meetup, come join the live show at 2 o'clock. We have Mark T. Live is going to be joining us today.
Yeah. Well,
and
thank you.
He usually asks all the questions all the time. I'm going to ask some questions today.
No, I didn't realize
And hopefully you guys will join us and ask some questions as well. All the things you always want to know about Mark.
Yeah, well,
there's never been anything like this.
All right.
It feels wrong without the guitar behind you today. I don't know why.
Can I? Do you want me to pause and go get it?
No, that's okay.
Okay, it's still in the case.
I want to direct you to some technical questions that we have.
Yes.
First of all, it's astounding to me the way AI is. Yeah, there's your guitar. Is
one of them
transforming life and is such a big part of, for example, the WGA negotiations. You realize that, and you're seeing more and more examples of it. AI is capable of doing creative jobs. I mean, you would think that writing a script would be something that AI couldn't do.
No, it can't.
But you're seeing that there not only is an ability for AI to write a script, but AI might even be able to write a really good script.
I typed into AI, I'm doing a Columbus, Ohio photo walk. I haven't even done the edit yet. Give me a subject line, a description, and a script, and it spit out. It told me all the places to go photograph, which I had already photographed without telling it. I mean, it did an amazing job. I would quibble with some of the verbs and some of the promotional words they threw in there, but it was close. It was really close and scary.
It very much scary, and it's something that we'll revisit from time to time here. I want to ask you about this Google thing, Google's new password killer, passkeys that sign you in based on fingerprints.
Right. So basically, they're bringing the Touch ID from the iPhone and Galaxy phones to the computer. If you have Touch ID on your computer, now you can sign into Google without having to type in all that crap, which is nice. It's not a password killer yet, but I will say that on my computer, on my Mac, I don't know about you guys in Windows land, but I love having Touch ID on my computer, and I wish I still had Touch ID on the iPhone. I hate Face ID, but Touch ID is fantastic.
You hate Face ID because it's too, once in a while when you have sunglasses on or you have a mask on or whatever, you can't. Why do you hate Face ID?
For me, it's more in the 80% range that it never recognizes me, and this has been consistent since they started it. It will occasionally pick me up. If it worked, then I would love it. Touch ID always worked.
Okay.
And I will say on the Galaxy, I have Touch ID because I went out and bought the Galaxy phone so that I could be more versatile and know the answer to all the questions on both platforms. And they have Touch ID, and I'd say 50% of the time, we don't recognize your fingerprint. So it does work better on Apple.
What about Apple generally? They have an earnings report. Is it today?
Yeah, it's today at 2 o'clock, and all eyes are on Apple to find out if they're going to be suffering from the same woes that have hit Amazon and Google and Facebook with all the layoffs. We haven't heard of any layoffs at Apple yet. Did they sell a whole lot of iPhones in the quarter? This is a quarter that's never as big as the previous quarter, but how are they doing? This is their chance to tell the world. I think they're going to be doing pretty well. I don't think it's going to be a record quarter, but I think it's going to be stronger than what we've heard from the other tech companies.
Because they deal with hardware. You're saying that. What's the reason that Apple would fall into that category?
You have 1.5 billion people using iPhones in this world. That means that you know about the nag messages, you know about all the things they can sell to you. So it's this ecosystem that just feeds upon itself because of its size. And they've got the computers and they've got the services and they've got the iPads, and they're all tied in together. When I say services, every time you get a nag message saying that you've run out of room, that's Apple services. Every time you say, hey, why don't you listen to music on Apple Music, and why don't you pay $10 a month to subscribe? That's Apple services. The number 2 division at Apple is called services. And that's the iCloud backup and the Apple Music and all the things like that. And that's where they're making the boatloads of money. And of course, what are the costs? For an iPhone, it costs money to make it. For services, it's not a lot of costs.
Well, that's why I would think that places like Google would also benefit, minus the key thing, which is what you're talking about, which is the hardware. I mean, they do. I shouldn't say, by now Google's expanded into some hardware. Maybe you can tell me, but it seems to me Google services, as you put it, is where the bulk of their edge comes over everybody else. YouTube and Google search and marketing through the Google search engine seems as though it would put Google in that category too. And yet I think they're not positioned as positively as is Apple, financially I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, Google, you're talking advertising, and that's a different animal. So across the world, more people have Android phones than Apple phones. In the United States, it's a different story, but across the world, it's Android software that Google gives away for free, so they get no money. And then it's on all these different phone companies. It's on Samsung, it's on Google, it's on LG, doesn't exist anymore, but it's on a bunch of Chinese companies that you haven't heard of. And so yes, the reach is big, but it's different in so many places. It's not uniform like Apple. So if Apple wants to send out a nag message to 1.5 billion people, they can do that. Google can't send that same message out to as many people.
What's happening with Elon Musk, Jefferson Graham? His latest is he just seems to, it's like vendettas on Twitter against organizations that have problems with Twitter, and as a result, they say we have problems with Twitter. Then he says, "I'll show you a problem. You're out of here," right?
Right. Very thin-skinned. If you're not going to post, I will give your Twitter handle away. So keep that in mind, Mark T. Live. Okay? You better keep tweeting.
But the latest is a pretty big organization.
NPR. Yeah. He says he's going to give NPR away to somebody else. I wish there were some controls that could keep him in check. Did you happen to watch the Puff interview that Bill Maher did with him that just said, you're such a genius, you're such a wonderful genius?
That was disgusting. That and the Bill Maher Puff interview that he did with Bill Barr. I can't believe it. I'm just glad that Bill Maher could get his head out of Elon Musk's butt long enough to show up and promote it everywhere, from CNN to Vox TV. It was sorry, but it was really embarrassing.
Oh, it was terrible. It was hard to watch. I had to turn it off 3 times and I couldn't continue. The Bill Barr one, at least he actually challenged him on something. He actually did on the report, on the Mueller report. With Elon Musk, there was no challenge. Just, you are a genius. How do you do it all? You're such a wonderful person.
Yeah, and can't wait till I get you back over to my house to get high. Hey, dude, this interview could be significant, but it's not. It's just it was really like watching somebody with a crush meet their crush.
This is somebody who bought a company and then fired 75% of the staff. And I don't think that ever came up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think what Maher would say is, I'm almost sure he would say, well, you showed us that in a lot of these organizations, they're overgrown, that, people can complain about it, but the fact is you don't need all those people running these informations. You proved it at Twitter. That's the kind of thing Maher would have said to Musk,
Oh,
You're genius.
I think he actually did prove that you don't need as many people, but what do you think of Twitter today versus Twitter 6 months ago? How
He gutted parts of Twitter that are associated with, fact checking. And you've talked about this before.
Yeah. I don't know about you, Mark, but when I turn on Twitter now, all I see are tweets from the same 3 or 4 people. Are you seeing that?
I do see a lot of stuff served to me, it seems, from the same people. Yeah. I'm not as engaged in Twitter as I used to be, but I still do go every day, multiple times. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it used to be really, I considered it a great destination for articles, for things I didn't know, for, op-ed pieces, whatever. I mean, even official, when you look at the fire departments in California and some of the official agencies that have to reach the public during times of crisis, I thought Twitter was a really great platform for that. I don't know that it is still.
It still works for customer service. It still is the place you go to complain, and you'll hear from the company. And I don't know of anywhere else you could go and do that.
Yeah, you're right. That was really a remarkable little twist in that Twitter platform. I wanted to ask you about this strike in Hollywood. We touched on it yesterday. Mm-hmm. I told everybody that I thought it's going to be a long one, and I still think so. I think the two sides are way far apart. There is essentially no negotiation going on. They've just brought their proposals to each other, but the proposals haven't changed. And you've got these big media companies that are dug in. I wonder if you can give me your thoughts about it. It does involve streaming and a lot of your world, technology.
I think it's going to be a long one. I think they're far, far apart, as you say, and the streaming issue, not just streaming, but like how many writers get hired, and the fact that TV shows are now done in 8 and 10 episode orders versus 22, and trying to do things cheaper. I think the big question for everybody out there is, how's it going to affect me? What does this mean? There's going to be fewer shows that I get to watch. Well, you're already seeing it on late night, though. I've got to believe that at some point, can't a producer book Julia Roberts and George Clooney or whoever onto the couch, and can't Colbert say, tell me about your latest movie? What's going on in your life? Does he, he should be smart enough to be able to do that stuff without a writing staff. If it's going to go for 6 months, they should be able to do interviews.
There is no question that he could do it. I don't mean to interrupt, but you face as Colbert two things. You just mentioned Colbert, so I'll just say Colbert, but anybody could fit into this, Kimmel or, Fallon, any of these guys. You face a problem. A, you're probably in the guild to begin with if you're Colbert, okay? So that may be the deal buster right there. But B, even if you're not in the guild, you have to cross the guild picket line to do your show every day, and those are your writers. I don't think that it would happen.
Okay, so didn't Leno go and do a show during the strike?
I think Leno and Carson both back in the
Conan
old days.
did as well.
Oh, wow. Is that? Oh, so did he? Okay.
I remember those.
So, so
really
who knows
shows.
what'll happen? They could start picking it up again, but on the scripted shows, you're looking at a year, right? I mean, right, Mark? You've worked on a lot of shows. Sure. These are done way in advance, and it's going to take a long time to catch up. I would also argue that there's more stuff on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime than you could ever watch. So if they start thinning it out, might be a little easier to find some stuff. And of course, it's a great time to catch up on some of the old shows that you never saw.
Jay Leno brings donuts to the WGA strike picket lines this year, as is tradition. He did the same thing during the 2007 strike. Jay Leno brought donuts to the writers on the picket line in Burbank. Interesting. I just really wanted to see whether he did. So there's kind of a cognitive dissonance there. I don't see whether he did or not, but if he did indeed, this is all about him breaking his collarbone and getting into that accident, so I don't know. But if he did indeed cross the lines, then you're right. I mean, if Conan, those are all writers. So if they all, there's Jay bringing pizza to the
donuts.
Donuts, sorry.
Disney. He's a
donuts
Disney
in
right
a pizza box.
He doesn't pick up his garbage, right? And he went to Randy's Donuts in Westchester and drove him all the way out there. Okay.
Well, if he did go all that way, I'd
up. Come on, Jay. You're a litter bug.
I'm just looking, and sorry, but this is just my obsession. The Tonight Show host, Jay Leno, showed his support toward the Writers Guild of America strike by bringing donuts as Jeff says, from Randy's. Leno was praised by Hollywood writers and social media users for his gesture, but I thought there was something about him. The Tonight Show did go on back in the day. Anyway, well, if you guys say it happened, it happened. I was
Well,
just trying
if
to get
it
a little
goes
bit
on
more.
for 3, 4, 5 months, I would predict that they're going to figure out a way to do a show. So, yeah.
I mean, they would be considered scabs, right? I mean, if they're, the Tonight Show, here it is, was not allowed to use writers during the strike in 2007. But Leno told monologue jokes that he claimed to have written by himself.
Okay, but you could do the show without the monologue, and then it comes a question, okay, you have 3 writers on the show, or 5 writers, or 7 writers, or whatever, and you have a staff of 200 people that aren't working, so what are you going to do?
Yeah, and that would be the argument for doing it, which would be, hey, there are a lot of other people whose livelihoods depend on this too, and we need to honor our obligation to them. It's really tough. I mean, if you're a real union person, it's a real tough spot, to cross a picket line. Anyway. So You're right about the 1 year to power back up. You're also right, I think, in alluding to the fact that studios were anticipating this. And so there is a pipeline of new content that will last for a while. And then the last thing I think I would say, and I think you'd agree, is that reality television, which is not scripted, will flourish probably.
And
game
you'll see
shows
more,
and reality.
And more news and more travel and more celebrity interviews and stuff like that, right?
How will this affect Jefferson Graham's Photo Walks TV?
More people are going to watch, right? Yes,
so
what I learned from photographing Japan.
Yeah. This Japan stuff is so good. So good. Yeah. And I'm excited about seeing you today. So 2:00 today on
2:00 today
on
YouTube.com.
All right. And Jefferson
Substack. I didn't plan a song today, but if in our closing minute, if the folks want to make a request, I'll go run and grab the guitar and I will play one of the requests if you give me 10 seconds. What do you say?
A request. What are you saying?
They
for a song of any
a song,
a theme?
A TV theme song for me to play. I will play it.
All right. I hadn't anticipated this, and I don't like Tony when the guests do this. They go rogue. It's not. I'm just
making a mess of your show.
Whoever is producing this thing has no idea what they're doing.
Is this where? Did you offend the guest? He got up and walked off the set.
He's got a thing, or somebody's got a request for a theme. I'll play it. Let me go get my guitar. I mean, I don't do that kind of show.
Oh dear.
I love the fact that you had that Succession. Thank you, Colleen. MASH theme, Succession, Odd Couple, Cheers, Get Smart. Mark, you've lost control. Exactly, I have lost control. Thank you.
Oh, Mission Impossible.
I love it. Find Jefferson Graham at jeffersongraham.substack.com. And, of course, you're on YouTube, Photo Walks TV, and I will be there today at 2:00. Thanks, Jeff.
You very much.
Yeah, I love it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
It really it was fantastic and quite surprising to see him just break out the guitar like that. That's the kind of talent that he's got, In the next hour, David Katz, the guy who makes predictions about the law that actually come true. His latest, the Ed Sheeran case. He said Sheeran will be found not to be is it libel, having copyright violations with Marvin Gaye's estate. David said last week that indeed Sheeran would walk, no problem. And Sheeran has walked today. But I'm more curious about Trump and the law in New York. He got slapped down in a New York courtroom in his case with the New York Times. He's got the E. Jean Carroll rape case working. And then the walls are closing in a bit on Donald Trump. But how much and what's that timetable? We'll ask David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, about that. Smash the like button like a boss.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Mark Thompson Show.
Yes, it is the Mark Thompson Show, and I'm Kim McAllister. Let's start with, I know we've talked about it before, and Mark discussed it at the beginning of the show, but really, this is such big news today. 4 Proud Boys members have been convicted of seditious conspiracy. The Justice Department charging the men in connection with their roles in the 2021 U.S. Capitol riot. The jury did not reach a verdict for a 5th member of this group who was on trial. Proud Boys, seditious conspiracy. A Republican donor who picked up the tab for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's grandnephew's private school tuition. What? A former White House ethics lawyer told ProPublica this is a move way outside the norm. Mark Martin, Thomas's grandnephew, who he was raising apparently as a son, is now in his 30s and told ProPublica he wasn't aware that donor Harlan Crow paid for his tuition. It's not clear exactly how much he provided, but if Crow paid for all 4 years of the education, it could have amounted to more than $150,000. Crow's office told ProPublica he was trying to help at-risk youth with tuition assistance.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how at-risk he is. Is he living in the
Clarence
house of
Thomas's
the Supreme
crib.
Court Justice? Yeah. He's not on the streets of, wherever. This is a sad story. We have more information now about the death of Tyree Nichols. The autopsy of Nichols is revealing new information about how he died. Back in January, Nichols was beaten by Memphis police during a routine traffic stop. He died in the hospital 3 days later. Well, this week, the medical examiner's office official autopsy found that Nichols died of brain injuries from blunt force trauma. While police initially reported Nichols was drunk during the incident, the report shows his blood alcohol level was 0.04. That is far below the legal limit. 7 officers have been fired for their roles in this incident. 5 are facing second-degree murder charges there as well. California and New York investigating hostile work claims against the NFL.
Oh, no.
The NFL being investigated after dozens of female former employees accused the league of discrimination and a hostile work environment. California Attorney General Rob Bonta and his New York counterpart, Letitia James, are serving subpoenas to the NFL's Los Angeles and New York City headquarters. They are launching a joint investigation into the league. This comes more than a year after more than 30 women shared claims of gender pay disparities, harassment, and gender and race discrimination with the New York Times. The CEO of Anheuser-Busch is saying, well, maybe we didn't mean to get involved with the transgender situation. Yeah. On an earnings call with investors today, Michael Ducaris clarified Bud Light's team up with Dylan Mulvaney, pictured here, was not a campaign. He said it was a one camp, one influencer, one post, not a campaign. Bud Light received backlash from conservatives after a personalized can was sent to Mulvaney to celebrate her 1-year anniversary of identifying as a woman. Well, since Mulvaney posted about the can, Anheuser-Busch lost $5 billion in market value and has seen a drop in sales. The CEO added Anheuser-Busch is providing direct financial support now to frontline workers like delivery drivers and servers who have been impacted by the calls to boycott the beer. And I will say, sometimes when you hear about somebody winning the lottery or winning a big chunk, you think, I hope it went to someone who really, really needed it. Well, in this case, It seems like that actually happened. This is not a picture of the woman who won, just a general picture of a homeless woman. But the story goes a woman who was homeless 6 years ago is now a millionaire thanks to a lottery ticket. This California woman won $5 million buying just one scratcher's ticket. She said she was homeless in 2017, but now plans to get married, finish her associate's degree. She also told the California lottery she wants to buy a house and invest the rest of her windfall. So, yeah.
Wow, that story has sort of a nice Hollywood ending.
Yeah, a homeless lady wins the formerly homeless lady wins the lottery. Not the one pictured, but close enough, right? Maybe? I don't know. Go with it. Just go with it.
Listen, the lady we're showing you is still super down and out, but there was
Could
another
also use
homeless
5
lady.
mil. Yeah. One homeless lady is the same as the next.
Apparently.
Oh, God.
That's great.
The Mark
A
Thompson
lady
show.
like this one
Similar.
has
in
just won
stature.
the right. Exactly.
Also with raggedy shoes. The Mark
Mhm.
Thompson Show is, of course, crowdfunded, which means we rely on you. If you would like to support the show, you can find links to Patreon and PayPal and so much more at themarkthompsonshow.com. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Use Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We're very excited. I was actually just doing some last-minute housekeeping around tonight's big event. We have our meetup tonight, and we just had somebody drop, but say, hey, I wish I could make it, but can't. So that left a spot open for somebody else. This guy, Ben, I just sent you an email. You will be in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. And then there was somebody else, I believe, who is first up in the waiting list area. So I will hopefully be able to get that person in as well. We're really limiting it to 15 people tonight because we want everybody to be able to talk and visit and have it. That starts at 7 tonight. I was crowing about David, and I'll get to him in a second. It looks like he's they're working with David.
He might be having technical difficulties.
Yeah, so let me so while David is getting settled, I will share this email, which is kind of cool. So
I've received a lot of positive letters.
I told you I got an angry email from somebody who, was, I'll read you pieces of that a little bit later. It's somebody who's highly partisan, and it was clearly just it was almost trolling. That's why I'm not super anxious to read it to you, but I'll read you a little bit of it. But this is a very nice email, and it kind of takes a twist. Gayla writes, I'm a loyal listener at the YouTube show. Follow you on Twitter. It wasn't until my partner saw another avid loyal listener wear one of your Mark Thompson Show ball caps from the Mark merch store at the gym, where he's a personal trainer, that convinced me to start pledging every month and to purchase some Mark merch. That's kind of cool. The only thing I can wish more of is to be able to listen to you and your loyal, loving crew for 3 hours. I know this involves labor, utilities, and such. Nonetheless, I'm laughing because it really is hard. It's all we can do to get the 2 hours on. Been listening to you since Station X. Gail S. Hashtag not gonna cry, she says.
I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry.
Thank you so much, Gail. That's really a nice note. So she was already a listener, and then her partner saw another listener with a Mark Thompson Show ball cap at the gym where the guy's a personal trainer. And now she's pledging, and she's got some Mark merch. I feel as though we do the show in a merch store. It kind of looks like doesn't it look like we've got the throw pillow there. This is the bottle opener. It's the lowest cost item at the merch site. Here's the coffee mug. This is the other, I believe this is not the hydration system. This is forget what it's called. And then the rest of these things. I feel like I've sent David Katz a mug, but I don't know if I have.
Was that a coffee mug? Yeah. That's what it's called.
No, well, this is a coffee mug, right?
Yeah.
This is the mug. So I'm talking about what that is. What is that?
That's a travel mug.
Okay, travel mug. I thought Tony would have the Get Mark merch site up by now, but I think he's actually busy getting David settled.
David's ready to good to go.
Okay, that is. I knew that was.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, what was happening? I was crowing about David Katz last hour, and the fact that he is Nostrakatzis when it comes to his predictions. He has picked off another one in the Ed Sheeran case that he predicted correctly. How about it for the former federal prosecutor, David Katz?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Yeah,
Hi.
it's great,
I hope my
David.
picture's a little more centered today.
Yes, very well done.
I hope my picture's a little more centered today.
It is, sir. Do you hear us or not? Is David
I hear
hearing
you.
us?
You don't hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
we hear
No, I
you.
hear
We
you.
hear
I
you.
hear you. I just want to
Okay,
make sure.
I hear you fine.
All right, good. David, you were right. Ed Sheeran was an endearing witness, just as you had predicted, and you had said that these generally are situations where the star, like Ed Sheeran, charming and lovely, will prevail. And indeed, that's what happened.
He sang for his verdict, too.
Yeah.
And now to what's happening. The Proud Boys conviction, of course, we talked about that, and we've spoken of that charge earlier. But at the same time, the Trump world legally has really become interesting because he was slapped down in his New York Times case, right? Maybe you can remind us what that is and what happened and whether you view that as significant.
I do view it as significant. He sued the New York Times and he sued his niece because his niece had given some information to the New York Times. Supposedly it was in violation of the protective order or whatever Trump's theory was. But the reality is, of course, this is how reporters report. They get information. They get information sometimes from government whistleblowers. They get it from all sorts of people who, give it to them. So Trump concocted a theory that the New York Times had done a terrible job. They colluded with her to violate the protective order, the do not disclose agreement, all of this kind of stuff, which is very clear under the Constitution that the press has a First Amendment to do exactly what the New York Times did. But that case kicked around. If you remember, that was the one that went into his taxes, went into how the family had gotten together, the Trump family, and kind of cheated this young woman. And she made all those allegations. She had a lot of financial records. They ran a huge series in the New York Times, if people will remember it. And it was at a very crucial time, too, because I think Trump was still president. He could really throw his weight around and did. He really tried to intimidate her and the New York Times. And it all came to naught. Of course, Trump lost, was not reelected. And now the case finally came to a decision. And the court said that not only was the Times right, but that Trump didn't have a legal leg to stand on. The actions of the New York Times were protected by the Constitution. And they ordered Trump to pay the New York Times a lot of money and to pay all of their attorney's fees. Good chance trying to get that out of Trump, who, as I said, a lot of people are in Florida, like OJ was, to avoid paying lawful debts. So it may be very hard to collect from Trump, but the principle was made that he lost, that it was basically not a well-substantiated or well-brought lawsuit at all. And that's great. The court has not ruled as regard to the niece yet, but the niece feels confident that she will prevail, that when the court reaches whether that case should be thrown out against her. But the case against the New York Times was thrown out, and Trump had to pay the Times' attorney's fees. And thank goodness, because people like Trump, there aren't that many like Trump, but certainly that's been Trump's specialty, is to try to intimidate opponents, to try to intimidate critics, to be willing to make them incur huge legal bills to fight them. Along the way, he's had Lawrence O'Donnell. He's sued Bill Maher for what was obviously a satire, a parody. But it makes them sweat, makes them spend a lot of money on legal fees, and that the New York Times was able to recoup all of its legal fees for all the grist that Trump put them through is, I think, a great principle for the First Amendment.
Why do you say, David, that the monies won't be recovered from Trump? I mean, he's a billionaire, and I don't understand if the decision from the judge and the decision from the court was so overwhelming and so absolute, why there'd be an issue getting the money?
Well, he had all of these trusts and the trusts within the trusts, and supposedly Trump himself never has any money. So actually executing the judgment and collecting it takes a lot of work. And if it ends up that all the money is supposedly in Florida, let's say Trump Tower is actually owned by a trust that's offshore, or it's owned by some business down in Florida, and so they can't get Trump Tower, they can't get his apartment. He's got all kind of machinations to try to stop them from doing that. And then if the money's abroad, then they have to do some kind of foreign judgment collection. It just takes a lot of work, a lot of lawyers' fees. If it's down in Florida, they have all of these protection laws. You can't take a man's house. That's very nice if it's, a single family house. If it's Mar-a-Lago, people roll their eyes and think, how can that be that you have a huge judgment and you can't collect? But Florida is known as a case where it's very hard to collect a judgment. A lot of people think that's why OJ went down there after OJ lost the civil case regarding the 2 alleged murders, and they never were able to collect from OJ, as you'll recall.
Yeah, it just does seem extraordinary. I mean, as his war chest grows, he's doing all kinds of through PACs, and as I say, his personal wealth, it may be scattered about. It's just remarkable to me that he could hide. But I think you've explained well how that. I guess it's possible with all of these trusts. It's the billionaires hide and seek with money.
It's very frustrating, but the New York Times has good lawyers too. I mean, they'll definitely make the effort because it's important. It's important that the New York Times not only win, but it's important that they collect because Trump's all about the money. And if this ends up being a huge economic disaster for him, he'll remember that. And he'll do less of this. But it's the intimidation tactic. It's very scary. People know. Like I said, he made Bill Maher spend a lot of money. He made Lawrence O'Donnell spend a lot of money. He made all of these smaller outlets and all of these people with less money than O'Donnell with MSNBC behind him, or Bill Maher. He made those people really sweat, and he froze their speech. Right? He chilled their speech, criticizing Trump.
Right, that's his way. I'll sue you, and I will. And Cohen talked about it in his book. But you don't need to read a book about it. As you say, it's right there on display. Now tell me about the E. Jean Carroll case. It's really, the details are pretty tough to stomach. I mean, you really, on the stand, she really goes through specifics of what happened in that fitting room at that department store in New York.
Well, let me give you 3 different perspectives on it if we have the time. First of all, your roving reporter of all things legal, David Katz, was in New York City just last week. And my wife said, go over to Bergdorf Goodman's to go look at the displays because they were the same ones as the theme at the Met Gala, which was Monday night. And no, my ticket somehow, did you get your ticket, Mark or Kim? I don't know what happened. That guy that Trump put in charge of the post office, he didn't deliver Democratic ballots, and he seems not to have delivered our Met Gala tickets. But the Bergdorf Goodman's, this super luxury department store, right across from the plaza and right near Trump Tower. I was over there looking at the display and I thought, come on, I'll never live it down if I don't go in. And the lingerie department is still on the 6th floor. And I went in there and I said to one thing that's interesting is when you come off the escalators, and that's the way it is. If they met at the revolving doors, Mark, that means that they bantered and flirted and chatted all the way up to the 6th floor. You can get there pretty quickly because you take those old style escalators and they're fun. There are mirrors by the side of them and you see what's on each floor and then you jump on the escalator. You get to 6 pretty quickly, but you do have to get from the ground floor to 6. If you get to 6, it's true that there's nobody standing right there. If it's still the way it was back then, there are different stores within the store. So there'll be like La Perla, there'll be something else. They'll have their own little area. And it seems that each little area has its one and only fitting room. So it would seem like this is, first of all, not just curtains hanging, and there's no fitting room next to the fitting room. So if you go into one of the fitting rooms and you close the door behind you, and the funny thing was that I said to the person there, I said, I'm a reporter. I'll never live it down if I don't take a look. I'm at Bergdorf Goodman's. Can I take a look at the fitting room? And she walked me right in there like this was a funny thing. And I thought, my God, I could be a maniac. I'm not. We walked in, we walked out, but you could see that the door does close behind you and you're in a cubicle. Now, one of the arguments is that she didn't scream. And it's certainly true that if you screamed, other people would hear you. But, she has an explanation why she didn't scream. And they had an expert who said that in many, many cases, and, people know this, but some people don't. So I'll say it, that the expert said that in many situations, the woman who's being raped does not scream. And of course, there's been all these studies about that. And the Carol called an expert to that effect. So I thought that would be kind of interesting that it's a luxury room. You stand in front of a mirror on a little, a little stand. You stand about 6 or 8 inches high on this little stand, and you look at yourself in a mirror, and there are lights around it. So it's kind of like a star thing. Obviously, it looks great, so you'll buy the piece, and that's where she alleges that 25 years ago or so, when the door closed behind him and her, instead of just more banter, he just mashed her against the wall, and he raped her, and she was able to escape and run out. And then, in corroboration of what she says, she called somebody 7 to 8 minutes later. I don't know if she had a cell phone or she was able to get home that quickly. It would seem that she had to have used a cell phone. And then she met with another, and that friend said, "You've been raped, you ought to report it." Then she met for dinner with a second friend, and her second friend said, Trump's lawyers, they'll just crush you. You'll come out of it looking soiled. You'll be ruined. I wouldn't fight someone that powerful with all those lawyers. And while she was testifying in court, she said, in fact, that's exactly what came to pass. Look at me. There's 2 tables of lawyers there for Trump. And Trump's lawyers, that was one of the reasons why they want to have a mistrial, one of several. I don't think this is worthy of a mistrial. I think the judge was right on this. But they want to clarify that, wait a second, she has just as many lawyers as we do. And one of the issues, not to get too inside baseball, but it's interesting, the LinkedIn founder, who's a billionaire, is funding this litigation for Carol. In other words, Carol is not just hoping to get a piece of the award. That's the usual contingency fee, Mark, that lawyers work on. But it's such a difficult case trying to not only beat Trump, but to collect from Trump. This is being funded by about $10 million, they say. And so Carol has a lot of lawyers, too. And one of the things that she said in her defamation action against him, which is one of the things being litigated, as well as the assault, civilly, the assault on her by Trump, the sexual assault. She says she was defamed because Trump said that, she was not attractive, that he didn't rape her or attack her. This thing didn't happen. She's a liar, and that she's a Democratic operative. She said that's all defamatory. None of that's true. So the legal theory, it's clever, but it hasn't worked so far, is that they ought to be able to question her about the fact that she got $10 million for her legal fees to fight Trump from a mega Democratic donor, right? The idea being, well, it's not defamatory to say that you're a Democratic operative. That was another reason for a mistrial that he wanted. But if I could talk to one of the interesting issues about the mistrial that I think may be of interest to people.
Yeah, well, quickly before you get to that, the Kevin Hobbs comment here. Wonder if her side was allowed to state that Trump refused the DNA sample. I wasn't aware of that in this trial. They wanted his DNA and he refused it. I don't know that you can you refuse it? Isn't there usually an imperative to provide your DNA if the court demands it?
These are very sharp litigators and very smart. This is really, I think, 2 good teams of lawyers against each other. And then, of course, Trump has tried on Truth Social, and the concern is that through his son on Twitter, to tell his side of the story, which may not be the true side of the story. From his point of view, this has all been very confusing. But what I understand happened was that there were so many motions in this case. It took so long. There were appeals. All of these things happened. I think that they decided the Carol case that they had enough without trying to go down this DNA route. And if they tried to get the DNA from Trump, there were all these issues, that it was just going to delay things more. They're going to play right into Trump's hands and get themselves another year or 2 delay. When Trump saw that they weren't really going after his DNA because they thought they had enough to prove the case civilly, then all of a sudden he wanted to give his DNA. You with me?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
He was,
it was at the
like
11th
playing
hour. He tried to get it in.
Exactly. So now he can run around and tout the fact that he was willing to give his DNA, but no one wanted to examine his DNA because that would show that it was a hoax. But at the same time, of course, he could have presented his DNA and he could have asked for the samples from her dress. He could have tried to prove it was someone else's DNA. At the end of the day, there's also issues that, she managed to get away from him, run away. I think the evidence, I mean, you have to get into all the details to understand it, is that he never ejaculated or anything. So there's no sperm or something. There's not like the famous Clinton Monica dress.
I see.
And so let's assume his DNA was on it. He'd met her at some point. Let's say his DNA wasn't on it. How much did it really prove? So I think that answers his question. But the one that I wanted to talk about was there is an interesting issue in these cases. Going back to Bob Dole in 1995, he helped pass a bill. He sponsored a bill which passed, which made it much easier to prove prior bad acts in a sexual case. It was aimed more at child sex abuse cases, but it also covered this kind of sexual assault case. If you remember, Dole was going to run and did run against Clinton in '96. One of the things he wanted to tout to moderate voters was that he'd gotten this bill which made it easier to prove sexual crimes. And of course, Dole lost. The bill has stuck around, and now in federal court, it's pretty clear that the judge should let in, after doing a balance, other instances of sexual offenses. And there are 2 other sexual offenses that have been allowed in. And if this case comes to a verdict of liability against Trump, which I believe it will, I think the issue on appeal, Mark, will center around allowing in these 2 other bad acts, which generally are allowed under this statute in a federal court. And this is in federal court, but there still has to be a balancing. So remember, he's charged with basically rape. And the 2 similar acts that have been allowed in is that he forced a kiss on a woman who came to interview him at Mar-a-Lago, and that while he was on an airplane, I guess some attractive woman, attractive to him, got seated next to him, and he fondled her. I mean, without her saying okay or wanting it, he fondled her. And the argument's going to be that those 2 are overly prejudicial, they're not probative enough, and that it was a close case and the judge should have kept them out. Having said all that, I believe that they will find him liable. There's 9 jurors there. I believe there are 9. It has to be unanimous. We talked about the fact that when Dominion sued Fox News, it would have had to be a unanimous 12 in Delaware. Hard to get if you're the plaintiff. It's fairly hard to get all 9 unanimously, even by a preponderance of the evidence. But I believe after the closing arguments that is what will occur. I believe that all 9 will find him liable. It's very hard to figure out what the damages are going to be. That part of the case will be interesting, for legal observers. How much will the award be to her? And I think that's my summary of the case. I hope that your listeners are interested, because they kind of can feel like jurors. I mean, imagine this. Don't look at the case politically. Look at the case kind of as a juror and figure out if you were, like 9 angry people, like the 12 Angry Men Henry Fonda movie. If you were back there, what arguments would you be making for and against? Obviously, there's Trump. Hopefully, these people are not going to find, liability against Trump just because he's Trump. And I think the people who are going to say, let's take a step before we find liability, I think what they're going to say is just, it was over 25 years ago. Now, she does have in her support that she did tell 2 people right away. But if you go with the idea that, oh, well, let's say maybe she's devious, it's not that the other 2 people would be lying for her. It would have been that she deviously, told those people that, so that they could back her up one day if she ever decided to pursue it.
That's a pretty long con. I mean, it happened. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Hey, the last thing I want to ask you, David Katz, is about quickly, if you could comment on the fact that Trump's attorney may be compromised in some judicial way. I mean, in a way, a legal way, I should say. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes. So he's got the same attorney in this trial as he does so far in the criminal case against him in New York City. Remember, the criminal case doesn't have anything to do with this. The criminal case has to do with the business records and whether they can kick that up to a felony because it was in furtherance of another crime, that crime being to violate New York campaign financing laws. That may depend a little bit on Michael Cohen's credibility. It will involve Stormy Daniels as a witness. Apparently, in about 2016, when this thing was first breaking, late 2016, Taco Pina was on CNN. I never met him over there, but I was on CNN myself a lot in 2018 when it was being broadcast out of LA before that show, Newsroom, moved to broadcast out of Atlanta. I didn't happen to meet Taco Pina there, although I met Avenatti quite a bit. Avenatti ended up being Stormy Daniels' lawyer for a while there in 2017, 2018. But while Taco Pina was on the show, he apparently told Don Lemon that he had had a consultation with Stormy Daniels. And Lemon asked him, well, what happened during the consultation? He said, well, I can't really tell you that. It's attorney-client privilege. If he had attorney-client privilege communications with Stormy Daniels, he must recuse himself from this case. And I think that he may be disqualified. Generally, I don't like those motions. I think a lot of times they're being used by the prosecution to give the criminal defense a hard time, to make a criminal defendant, like some of the people who hire me are not mega companies. They can afford to fund a criminal defense and have me. But the more motions, right, that the government can make, the more they just add the expense on to someone who's paying their own freight for their criminal defense. So
Sure.
I see those as often being tactical. A lot of times I don't take a very good view of them. And the judges have to make sure there's not a conflict of interest. And I've seen a lot of cases where I think the prosecutors are exploiting that and getting the defendant, more worried than they have to be. They're very tangential, these supposed conflicts. But his is a real one. His is a real one. And I think the prosecution properly brought that up. And I think it's properly being inquired into.
And so what's your prediction on? We're seeing him now. There's a picture of him
Oh
on
my!
the screen.
If you keep asking me for predictions, it's like
It's pretty great because you're
right on every horse.
1,000.
I can't bet right on every horse race. From what I've heard so far, it sounds like Taco Pina will leave the case, maybe voluntarily. He doesn't need ethics charges. He doesn't need a finding by a judge, they can find another good lawyer for it. Also, the trial is down the road. But if he had any kind of consultation that he himself said he had, and which was attorney-client privilege, they do this in small towns. If there's a great divorce attorney in town, and one spouse doesn't want the other spouse to get them, they'll call up and leave a message, and then say they had an attorney-client contact, and that the attorney's disqualified. I mean, people play all kinds of legal games, but I don't think this is a legal game. I think he was talking about the case on CNN. I think she reached out to him as a prospective attorney. For whatever reason, he didn't take the case. And that's way too close. If it was one confidence, that's one too many. He shouldn't be in a case where he had confidences from the witness testifying against his client. No. And of course, There'll be an inquiry whether he shared anything with Trump. But I think he's a prudent guy. I think that he'll get out of the case. That's my prediction. Taco Pina will not represent Trump ultimately in the criminal case brought by DA Bragg in New York City.
Nostra Katzis has spoken. It was what a week you've had. Your predictions have been accurate. Your explanations, of course, are always terrific. David, so grateful for you spending some time with us here. Thank you.
Great to be with you and Kim.
Yep, we'll look forward to next week. David Katz, everybody, come on. Pretty great, that David Katz.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am tangential as a ding word, says Tom. So congratulations, David Katz, on swinging a ding word in there. It is, I can't believe, well, we're going to take a break for Kim's news. And then Cory has waited so patiently. Red Team Blues is the book. And I want to talk to him about the demise of First Republic, the banking system generally, SVB, but then his book, which takes place in this world and involves crypto and a heist, and it's really pretty juicy. So I'm excited to talk to him. So smash the like button like a boss for David Katz.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Thank you for being here. Kim's news, and then we'll talk to Cory. Mark Thompson Show.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Use Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, Kim. I don't know where she is.
There it is. I'm Kim
All right.
McAllister on the Mark Thompson Show. I'll get it right. It'll happen. It is a big day in Oakland. This is a massive school shakeup. More than 3,000 teachers are now on strike, many planning to hit the picket line today. The district notified parents last night, confirming schools will be open with office staff in place to ensure students are safe. Who's going to send their kid to school with the office staff? Well, there have been reports of progress made, but the teachers union says after 7 days of bargaining, it is no closer to a contract deal for higher pay. San Francisco supervisors are now wanting the San Francisco DA to reconsider the decision in the Walgreens shooting case. Several San Francisco supervisors are demanding charges in this Walgreens shooting. They want the district attorney to take a second look at this case. She had already said evidence shows a private security guard acted in self-defense when he killed a suspected shoplifter, last week. One supervisor believes this at least deserves manslaughter charges and plans to draft a resolution asking the DA to reconsider that decision.
That's a big situation with that, right? That was a big decision not to charge. So
it was a big decision not to charge. And, maybe it does warrant a second look. I don't know. But you would think that they, worked with the police department to really pin down what happened there. So maybe they need to go talk to the board of supervisors and present the evidence there to make them, help them get on board. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is heartbreaking, though, and absolutely unacceptable. That is how the Alameda County District Attorney describes the murder of a 21-year-old woman. She was shot in the head by a stray bullet. Happened last weekend while she was driving through Oakland. Police say a man was firing a rifle at cars that were just passing by because he was mad about them racing down his street at night. The DA revealed a slew of charges yesterday, including murder. The suspect set to be arraigned next week. And here's one of these Courtney stories, really. The remains marked as Jane Doe in California have now been identified as a Navajo woman who went missing almost 4 decades ago. They were identified as then 24-year-old Christine Lester, who disappeared from northern Arizona in 1987. Her remains were buried in a gravesite in California because authorities couldn't identify the body found by the side of a roadway in Fresno 36 years ago. According to authorities, the remains in the burial were exhumed in 2020 to test the DNA, and they found a match to one of Lester's siblings. The Madera County Sheriff's Office has not released the cause of Lester's death to protect any further investigation there. This is, people get their DNA tested. It leads to all sorts of things. Amazing.
True. Exhumed, by the way, is a ding word.
I'll take it. I'll have my dings. In the South Bay, a Santa Clara County City Councilman pleading not guilty after being accused of lying about leaking information to the San Francisco 49ers. Santa Clara City Council member Anthony Becker accused of providing a confidential grand jury report to the 49ers, criticizing the organization and then lying about the leak. That report, titled Unsportsmanlike Conduct, Santa Clara City Council alleged that council members regularly voted in a manner favorable to the Niners. Prosecutors say the football team has bankrolled Becker's political career by spending at least $3.2 million through independent expenditure committees for his council race, as well as an unsuccessful bid for mayor. Speaking of sports, University of Alabama baseball coach out of a job over betting allegations. A statement from the university's athletic director says Brad Bohannon has been terminated for violating the standards, duties, and responsibilities expected of university employees.
We have processes and protocols and standards.
That's what you meant to say. Yeah.
That's exactly right. The allegations center around suspicious wagering activity connected to Alabama baseball games.
It's an odd thing in this country. We're legalizing gambling on sports in a very rapid fashion. That is to say, there are places you can gamble and place bets in the stadium in which you're watching a sporting event. And we're legalizing it across many states. And yet, when people participating in sports are involved in gambling, we DQ them, right? We get rid of them.
Conflict of interest there, right?
Yeah. So I see how the culture is making it tough on, some of the we want a purity to our sports, and yet we create all the temptation around it to essentially concoct a sport that lacks purity.
For more on that, please refer to 810 The Spread. The MTV Movie and TV Awards will not have a host this weekend. Drew Barrymore announcing she's pulled out of the hosting gig because of solidarity with striking writers. She says everything we celebrate and honor about movies and television is born out of their creation, and she says she will instead host next year's show. MTV also made the decision to cancel the award show's red carpet. Earlier this week, of course, the Writers Guild of America decided to go on strike for the first time in 15 years. So Drew Barrymore lining up with
This
the
is
writers.
what I was talking about, though, when people, when Jefferson Graham was saying, well, they can just go on, Stephen Colbert can go on, Fallon can go on, and they can just do interviews and just ad-lib. Sure they can, but they're going to be crossing a picket line. They may not want to do that. So.
No, I don't think they will want to do that because eventually the writers are going to come back, and these people are coworkers and friends. You support them, right?
Right.
Mark Thompson show is crowdfunded. That means we have to rely on you. You help keep us going by contributing via Patreon and PayPal, and we appreciate it so much. You can find the links and so very much more at themarkthompsonshow.com. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson. The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Thank you. Thank you for that smattering of recorded applause. It would be really lost on most people, but I drink it in like it was fresh orange juice just squeezed for me. Smash the like button for all the great stuff that's happened today, and now we continue with something great. Here's a guy who's an author. He's also a writer, journalist, and he's created quite the yarn. He's an activist, New York Times best-selling author. How about it for Cory Doctorow? Is that how you say your last name, Cory?
That is how I say my last name.
All right. Wow, this is odd that I would have that right, but I'm delighted that that's the case.
Once I get east of France, it turns into Doctorow, but on this side of the Atlantic, it's Doctorow.
You have a background in this world. I mean, obviously, you're a hell of a writer. Red Team Blues is your new one, and there it is on screen. But you have some knowledge of this world that you write about. You have sort of an eclectic background. I was reading about you, and I wonder if you could give people a sense of that background. I mean, it involves MIT. It involves writing for I think The Guardian. You're a guy who does a lot besides just crank out these best-selling novels.
It's true. I write when I'm anxious. I work through the pain. So I got a lot going on. 7 more books coming out in the next 3 years. So yeah, for more than 20 years, I've been a writer and an activist. I've published dozens of books, and I've worked with a nonprofit in San Francisco called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I was their European director for many years, working on issues related to privacy, free speech, competition, antitrust, all of that good stuff. I have an honorary doctorate in computer science, and I'm a visiting professor of CS at the Open University in the UK. I'm about to get an honorary doctorate of law from York University in Toronto, which is one of the 4 undergrad programs I dropped out of. That's very exciting. And I'm an MIT Media Lab research affiliate. I also am one of the owners of a website called Boing Boing, and I wrote that for about 20 years. And these days I edit my own website, which is called Pluralistic.
Wow. That's a pretty damn good resume.
Yeah.
So tell me about your take on what's going on in the banking system. This, by way of this to get to the book, of course.
Sure.
The banking system and then crypto, and then you can take us into this book, which involves a heist and all of those things also.
Well, I'll start by saying that, I don't think that there was anything foreordained that said that the web was going to turn into 5 giant websites filled with screenshots of text from the other 4. That these are like policy outcomes that are deeply related to what's going on in finance, which is to say that, the same year Ronald Reagan hit the campaign trail as the year the Apple II Plus went on sale. And the tech industry has grown up with deregulation. One of the big drivers of that is finance, making firms too big to fail and too big to jail. We lived through that in 2008. We're kind of living through it again. But it also allowed for the financialization of tech firms. And, I started in the tech sector, it's nearly 3 decades ago. And I was part of the group of people who were very excited about the liberatory potential of technology and very frightened about how bad it could go if it went bad. That's how I ended up working in digital human rights. But what I think I didn't recognize was that, where for the first couple of decades of the tech industry, there had been a strong prohibition against anti-competitive acquisitions and mergers and predatory pricing, that was dead, and that we were going to see the growth of ever larger firms, which also happened in finance. It also happened in like beer and professional wrestling and cheerleading and shipping and so on. And the difference is that, of course, it was all driven by finance. So as the sector becomes less competitive, the discipline that's imposed on it by the fear that someone might go somewhere else with their business is decreased. And the ease with which the sector can buy policies that are favorable to it increases, right? When tech was young, when the Napster wars were being fought, the tech industry booked a lot more revenue than the entertainment industry, but it was like 100 squabbling companies. And the entertainment industry was like 6 companies that all agreed with each other. And so in every policy fight, they just lost. Finance, as it became more concentrated, all of the things we used to do to limit the risk that finance could create, how big it could be, how much uninsured hot money they could have under deposit, how they had to hedge those deposits, what happened when they failed, all of that stuff went out the window. And I guess the apotheosis of it recently is Silicon Valley Bank, right? Where they just winged it. They just made up a bunch of rules, but the rules were very selective, right? So they said, okay, look, we're gonna make sure all these depositors are whole. We're going to claim that that's not going to cost the public any money. The way we're going to make that claim is we're going to say, well, we're going to charge it to the other banks. But the other banks are in such an anti-competitive position that if you raise their cost basis, they'll just charge their least able to leave customers higher sums. This is why you and I probably never pay an overdraft fee, and other people pay overdraft fees that are compiled on penalties that are compiled on fees, which sometimes can reach to 1,000,000+ % APR, right? And so this is just a way of spreading the cost around. But there were lots of people who had business at SVB who didn't get bailed out. So, for example, there were tens of thousands of affordable housing units in Boston and in the Bay Area that were slated to be built with loans from SVB. And when they were just making up some new rules for what to do about SVB, they did not make up a rule that said, we will provide continuity for those loans so that low-income people can have housing. That was just like not in the frame. Crypto is very interesting as a kind of peak of this phenomenon, because crypto, like most fintech, is just a way of saying, I want to do a thing that would normally be heavily regulated, but I'm going to add ... with a computer to the end of the activity and insist that it no longer has the character of regulatability. It's not a security anymore. I'm not doing securities dealings. This is not usury, whatever. And I think as we start to write the postmortems on crypto, as we approach the post-crypto era, one of the most telling things about all of this is that although trillions of dollars was wiped out of the crypto marketplace, we didn't see trillions of dollars worth of impact on the real economy. Like, if you remember the great financial crisis in 2008, a couple $1 trillion goes up in smoke. We knew it, right? You knew it from the store on the corner. You knew it from the job your cousin had, whatever. Everybody knew what it felt like to live in an economy where trillions of dollars went poof. But trillions of dollars went poof with crypto. And unless you were invested in crypto, and I'm not saying that those people deserved it. I think a lot of people were suckered into it by Super Bowl ads and fast talking people. You didn't notice at all, right? If you had no crypto investments, you didn't notice at all, which suggests that there never were trillions of dollars, which suggests that it looked a lot more like someone minting a coin and buying it for themselves with another wallet for $1,000, and then minting 1,000 more of them and declaring that the coin was $1 million worth of blockchain, and then finding 5 suckers and putting $5,000 in their pocket, and then, running for the exits. And I think a lot of people really felt like they got rich. There's actually a term for this from kind of scamonomics. John Kenneth Galbraith coined the term the bezel. And the bezel is the magic interval after the con artist has your money, but before you know he's a con artist. And in that moment, you feel richer, he feels richer, everybody feels richer. It's this moment in which everyone is ecstatic. And the thing about the bezel is it's just before the crushing disappointment. And it is the moment at which you can avert disappointment by intervening. But nobody is going to intervene when everybody's happy.
It was a lot of momentum around the crypto. Just apotheosis is a ding word, yes. So congratulations, Cory.
What's a ding word? Is that a bad word or a good word?
No, it's a good thing. Well, it's neither good or bad. It's just we ding SAT type words. Like, words,
okay.
Bigger words.
I'm a Canadian. We never had those.
Those are larger words that are used in conversation, just like naturally.
Fair enough. That's perfectly cromulent of you.
It's all right. Now, so first of all, it's fascinating to hear you dissemble the crypto thing so effectively. In fact, you can argue that crypto is this thing that's not real, and you've actually, with the $1 trillion thing, kind of really pointed up how it may indeed be not real. But I haven't heard that particular concoction that you just offered, which is essentially it's super scammy in some instances. Is it your take that all of crypto is that way, super scammy?
So I don't think it's all super scammy. I think that there are people who are true believers. And I think that in every one of these bubbles, there are people who are in it for good reasons. I have spent literally decades fighting for privacy, decentralization, fewer bottlenecks that can be used to choke off unpopular speech and so on online. And when I hear crypto people talk about what they value about it, it rhymes with what I've said and what I've fought for all this time. I think that a lot of people got bamboozled. And I think that, one of the ways to understand this is to look at a specific crypto instrument, which is the smart contract. And a smart contract is a kind of chimera, another ding word maybe, a crossbreed between a prospectus, right, which is like what you give to an investor to explain what they're investing in, and a computer program. Most people can't read either, right? Very few people can read a prospectus. Very few people can read a computer program. The Venn intersection of those two, it's like a sphincter. And so this is a long-standing principle in the con. Back when the modern con was being invented in the 1920s, there were two major hustles that you could pull. One was a racing scam and the other one was a stock market swindle. And the ropers would ride the trains and look for big spenders, look for high rollers. And they would find the stockbrokers and they'd run a racing swindle on them. And they'd find the racing pros and they'd run a stock swindle on them, because everybody assumes that their expertise carries over into adjacent domains. And so I think that a lot of people who understood computers really well assumed that the finance stuff was as sound as the technology stuff that they thought they understood, and vice versa. And it was such a good way to bait and switch people. And a lot of times when you really drilled into it, it just failed to make any sense. Like, if you remember, there were a bunch of people who raised a bunch of money to buy a copy of the U.S. Constitution, right? And they gave that money to just some dude who went down to Sotheby's to bid with it. So they had this whole system that was very expensive and difficult to maintain, this blockchain system whereby they could assemble the funds, vote on what to do with them, and mobilize them and put them in the pocket of this dude. But then it was just in the pocket of this dude, right? And the idea that this was like a self-licking ice cream cone, right? That you could just like wind it up and it would go was completely wrong. And no one was ever able to answer for me. If you were willing to trust this dude with all the money that you raised doing this whole weird math trust thing where you supposedly didn't have to trust anyone, but you're willing to trust him with all the millions, why did you just let him run the server, which would cost like a quarter, instead of the thousands of dollars and the incredible complexity that you built in order to boil this all down to turning around and handing this guy your money? And what are you going to do if he takes the money and goes away, as happens so often with crypto, right? If your position is, oh, we're a distributed autonomous organization, we're a new kind of group that cannot be sued and has no standing and is not a thing, and we're just a collective, we're as free as the air, who's going to sue this guy? Right? When he doesn't run it with your money, who gets to go to the cops and say, that guy stole our money, right? Who has standing?
Well, that's the other thing, just as an aside, that you really find in that unregulated, untethered world, no cop on the beat to run to.
Yeah. And it's funny to watch people who in one breath were saying securities regulation, finance regulation is an irredeemably corrupt institution, which it may be, right? Like, see Bernie Madoff, right? See Jeffrey Epstein, whatever, right? See all those useless stock buybacks, right?
See SVB, which was clearly, the feds were asleep at the switch with SVB. Yeah.
Right. Who then suddenly got religion, right? And when their money was stolen. And, this happens all the way through the history of crypto. So the Ethereum blockchain, they were the first people to do a smart contract, and their first smart contract had a bug, and someone stole all their money. $50 million got stolen out of this smart contract. And the whole point of Ethereum, indeed the whole point of a blockchain, is that you're going to write things into the blockchain that no one can ever alter. It is the unalterable permanent ledger. Everything else hangs off of this. So these guys get ripped off for $50 million, and they're like, why don't we rewrite the ledger? Just this once. Right? We all trust each other. This isn't like you have one Pringle and then you wake up in the morning covered in crumbs and there's no Pringles left. We're just going to do it once. We'll never do it again. Right? And it's amazing how over and over again they said, oh, indelibility is great. And then they're like, oh, wait, I've been indelibly scammed. Let's del that a little.
Cory, let me, it's such good takes on that. Let me now, in our last couple of minutes, talk about this story, okay? Take us through the premise, because it's a heist, and heists are always fun.
Yeah, sure. So the protagonist of this book, Red Team Blues, is a guy named Marty Hench. And for 40 years, he's been living in Silicon Valley. He's a forensic accountant, and he specializes in unwinding Silicon Valley finance scams. This is where he got to start. Everyone else was like, I can use spreadsheets to hide money. It's like, you're adorable, because I can use spreadsheets to find it. And so every weird idea that a tech bro has had for 40 years, he's unwound, and he's ready to retire. Driving around up and down the peninsula and down to San Diego in a luxury tour bus that a rock star gave him when he found the money the manager had stolen, that he calls the Unsalted Hash. And he's driving around in his fancy tour bus, sleeping in Walmart parking lots, eating at Michelin star restaurants, living the dream. And his old best friend, Danny Laser, who's a person who remembers when crypto meant cryptography, has unwisely gotten involved in a cryptocurrency. And even more unwisely, he hid a back door in his cryptocurrency. And now the keys that control that back door have gone physically missing. And Marty has to hunt them down, lest the money launderers who are using this blockchain kill his old friend Danny Laser. Suddenly it gets very high stakes. And what happens is a kind of high stakes thrill ride. I write, as I mentioned, I write a lot. I have 7 more books coming out. My wife can't keep up. I gave her this book when I finished it, and I said, honey, just read the first chapter. I know you don't have time to read them all. And then I woke up at 2:30 in the morning. She was sitting up in bed next to me and I said, what are you doing? And she said, I just had to find out how it ended. The next day, my editor emailed me, and he just, can I swear on your show?
You can say it. It's okay.
He said, he sent me a 4-line email that just said, that was a fucking ride. Whoa. And bought 3 more of them. So there are 2 more of them, 3 in total, all coming out over the next couple of years.
That's terrific.
And it's gotten great reviews. It is a book about the curdling of the dream of tech for liberation and how finance took it away. It's the swan song of an older man who's seen it all, but who still believes. It was so much fun to write, and the critical response has just been amazing, especially like from people who are tech veterans, cryptographers, people who love crime novels, forensic accountants. They're all writing online about how much they love it. So very excited.
Terrific.
My publisher,
Congratulations.
Very excited.
Yeah. So Red Team Blues, where is the best place for people to get it?
Well, if you're, watching in the Bay Area, Come along tomorrow night, 7 p.m. at the Books Inc. in Mountain View. Me and Mitch Kapor, the creator of Lotus 123, are doing a double act. This weekend I'll be at the Berkeley Book Festival. Otherwise, this is sold wherever books are sold. You go on the giant bookstore that funds the penis-shaped rocket ships for the bald guy. You can go to your local independent bookseller. And the one caveat is that none of my audiobooks are sold on Audible. They won't carry them because I won't let them lock them to the platform forever. They use this mandatory digital rights management. So you can buy them everywhere that's not Audible. And this audiobook is amazing. It's read by Will Wheaton, and it's for sale at like Libro.fm and Google Play and at
oh, great. Okay, that's worth
Downpour, all those places.
All right, that's worth checking out the audiobook of
Google it.
Yeah, Red Team Blues. And again, tomorrow night. This is interesting. So tomorrow night, where is it again?
The Books Inc. in
Mountain View. Right.
Yeah.
Books Inc. in Mountain View at 7:00. So you want to meet Cory. How cool.
And Mitch, a computing legend.
Yeah, how about that? Look at you. You give me a wild inferiority complex, so I'm glad you're leaving. Congratulations
it's okay, my
on
personal
everything
life's
you've done.
really screwed up.
Well, at least there's that then. Please come back and visit. I love your takes on stuff. Really cool.
Anytime. Yeah.
And
thank you
congrats
so
on the
much for
book.
having me on.
Yeah. Red Team Blues is the book. Cory Doctorow. Thanks, Cory.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Really, really cool. Love it. He was great.
The Mark Thompson Show.
He was really great. That was a lot of fun. Tony, the clock on the wall says we must wrap up.
Yep. One
I
thing
have to
real
get
fast.
the streamers and champagne ready for tonight's meetup. Kevin Hobbs, 2626. Big shout out. Kevin is HOF.
Look at that.
On this show as a supporter. Hall of Famer, isn't he? Really, really cool. Tony, you're a Hall of Fame in your own way.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
Yeah.
You pulled a lot of tough situations out of the fire, my friend. Kim is headed over. Is Nikki doing a show today, or what's going on?
We recorded the first 40 minutes, and then we've got some guests, and I'll be doing it myself. So,
Wow, there's a lot going on over
How
at the
we roll.
Nikki
In the chat.
Maduro channel. Oh, it's in the chat? What is that?
I put a link in
What?
the chat to the show.
Put in the link in the
thanks,
chat.
Tony.
Tony, how about
You
that?
are a Hall of Fame. You're the man.
Tony will join us in tonight's meetup. Those of you who have buzzed in and want to join, if there are any last minute, there have already been a couple of last minute, I can't make it. So we'll get to welcome you. So you are, there you go.
We're all doing it. All of us.
All right.
I think all three of us clicked on it.
Yeah, tonight is
I'm
the
Shadow
night.
Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show.
We'll have stories.
Bye-bye.
We'll have stories of tonight tomorrow. Tomorrow, it is Florida and more. Until then, bye-bye.